When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt.
Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a new episode of Let's Talk. I'm your host Khalil Amunet. Today's topic is tolerance in Islam. Muslims today often hear about the intolerance of Muslims. They point out that Muslim nations restrict freedom and that religious discrimination is rampant, and that terrorism stems from Muslims' thirst for revenge against the non-believers. How can we bring forth the tolerance of Islam? How do we explain to non-Muslims that Islam is actually a tolerant religion? To talk about these topics is Dr. Haytham Al-Haddad, the director of the Muslim Research and Development Center, or Foundation, think tank, aiming for solutions for Muslims in the West. You can visit this website, islam21c.com. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for being here.
Jazakallah khair.
And also we have Dr. Hatim Al-Hajj. He's the director of the Sharia Academy of America. Welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
And of course we have our in-studio audience. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, guys. So I'd like to turn the show to Dr. Haytham, and he will make introduction to the topic.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. First of all, I'm very glad, Brother Khalil, and for the Huda TV to discuss this important topic, because it is such an intellectual topic that is always misunderstood. I'm very honored to be along with Dr. Hatim to discuss this. See, when we discuss this topic, we need to remember a few things. I will put them in points. First of all, any religion, any system, not necessarily a religion, tolerate certain practices and ethos and being intolerable towards certain other practices and ethos. Any system, whether Islamic system or non-Islamic system, whether divine system or non-divine system, man-made law or divine law, any system. This is one thing. The other thing is this, once we discuss the core issue of this topic, which issues we can tolerate and which issues we cannot tolerate, we need to ask ourselves a very fundamental question. Who decides for that?
Who decides what is tolerance?
Yes. Who decides what is tolerance, what can be tolerated, what cannot be tolerated? Who decides that? As you know, simply for Muslims, we believe that there is a neutral entity. And that entity is not a human being. That entity is the creator of human beings. And we feel, just from a rational perspective, along from a textual perspective, that the most qualified entity to define what is right, what is wrong for human beings is that entity which is the creator, Allah Jalla wa Ala. أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ. Doesn't he know what he created, or doesn't the one who created knows what he has created? So this is our belief. Now, if we put this aside for a moment, all non-Muslims or non-Islamic systems, they don't go back to the divine to receive what is right and what is wrong. They themselves defines, as some intellectuals say, they define themselves beauty, or they define what is right, what is wrong. Now, when we say that people define for themselves, then this brings us to the democratic process, or democracy, and the criticism regarding democracy, because democracy is the decision of people, as we know. So can people decide for themselves? Are they the best to define what is right, what is wrong? Are they the best people to define what is tolerance, where we can tolerate and where we can't? So this is a big question mark. I'm just posing questions in order to understand the topic in a very structured and systematic way. Otherwise, we put ourselves, unfortunately, like what is happening now, in a defensive mode, and we start using an apologetic terminology. Or some of us might be very aggressive. No, let us just pose neutral questions. But these questions are very important to be understood in order to clarify the Islamic position or even any other position. So this is another question. The third question, we need to understand, how do we view our life as Muslims? This is a very fundamental point, because we view our life as it is a test. خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم. Created life and death just for one purpose, which is what? A test. What does that mean? Our life is divided. Our life, not Muslims' life, our life as human beings, this life is divided into two parts: life before death and life after death. Life after death is longer, more important, and it is the final destination. So once we talk about tolerance, we need to have this link between life after death and this life, and how tolerance fits into this equation. We believe as Muslims that anything we need to do in this life, including tolerance, including tolerating or not tolerating certain practices, all is linked to our life after death, because it is the most important part of our life. Al-Hayawan, as Allah Jalla wa Ala called it in the Quran, the continuous, long-lasting life. So this is a third point that we need to put in mind. The fourth point that we need to put in mind when we discuss tolerance is that let us go back to history, because sometimes there are theories, and those theories cannot be put into practice. And let us see throughout history who were the most tolerating nation worldwide. And many people look at the current history and look at the current liberal countries that started to exist only after the Second World War. Only after the Second World War. And they look at some practices in America or even in Britain or elsewhere in European countries, and they see, well, see, you cannot compare the tolerance they have with tolerance in Islam. And
they have the ultimate tolerance for everything.
Exactly. And they don't have a totalitarian view about tolerance practiced in these Western countries, and they don't look at history as well.
So what are some examples of over-tolerance from the Western nations?
As I said, the first point that we have mentioned is that who defines what? So for Western, they tolerate certain practices, but they don't tolerate certain other practices. Same thing for Muslims. But they accuse Muslims that they don't tolerate what they tolerate. So why do they take their standard as the ultimate standard, as the standard, and judge others according to their standard?
Yes,
we can say the same thing. We can judge them according to our standard. And that's why we will have an end block, as they say, or a blocked end. So if we discuss it from this perspective, we need to take other dimensions and bring other dimensions into perspective. For example, in the West, I challenged a number of people. I said, how many people were killed by non-Muslims even after the Second World War or during the Second World War? Forget about Muslims being by non-Muslims. No, I'm talking about by non-Muslims killed by non-Muslims. You know Nagasaki and Hiroshima and what happened there. America killed in Vietnam more than 4 million people. You see, many people, when we start talking about this, they say, always we blame others. No, here we are in a comparative discussion. And if you want to start by accusing Muslims that they are intolerant people, then we can pose also the same accusation towards others. So if it is a matter of accusations, then we can say that from Western perspective, there are certain proofs that make it very evident that the West was not tolerant to many other practices that they don't accept in the first place.
The majority of the people don't necessarily choose the most tolerant way. Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj, I'd like to get your introduction also.
Well,
or take on what Dr. Hatem.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll look at it from a different perspective, a little different perspective, which is if we do a little bit of introspection and we examine our conditions, we may be sometimes intolerant, but we want to ask ourselves, and we want to pose this question, whether this intolerance of Muslims is because of their Islam or because of some other factors. And we also want to look at those practices that are intolerant that could be attributed to some Muslims. Are they representative of all Muslims or not? If you look at the first issue, which is the mistakes that Muslims may commit, are they because of their Islam or not? You will find that throughout the history, the mistakes that may have been committed by some Muslims, such as Al-Hakim bi-Amrillah, for instance, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, who gave the commands to bring down the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This particular person, was he representative of true Islam?
Or of the Muslims' opinion at the time?
Yeah, or of Muslim opinion at the time. Well, that's the second issue, whether those people are representative of Muslim opinion. The first is whether this is representative of Islam. In fact, Al-Hakim bi-Amrillah, who used to rule over Egypt and Greater Syria, Sham, which is Greater Syria, is a heretic. He's
yes.
And he is the one who actually ordered not only the destruction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but also Cairo, which is his capital city. So the man was not a stable person at all. He was not representative of Islam in any way, shape, or form. In fact, he was accused of heresy.
I think he ended up dying mysteriously or something.
He ended up fleeing and dying mysteriously, and so some people have certain beliefs regarding him, and etc. That it's all considered in the category of heresy. But the second question is whether a person like this is representative of the public opinion, the common folk in Muslim countries. Certainly not. So they are not representative of Islam, they are not representative of the public opinion. I usually say to people like in America where I live, that it is quite important that you stand up to injustice, because since you have democratic regimes and your governments are supposedly representative of the people, then the burden on you is much greater than historically. For instance, Richard the Lion-Hearted, leading a crusade against the Muslim East, may have not been representative of public opinion in England. May have or may have not been. But he did not really consult public opinion. But since there is more say for the people in Western countries, then they should be really quite careful about what their governments do, because if someone blamed the country for a mistake, then it's a little bit more acceptable than to blame people during the time of Richard the Lionhearted for a decision that Richard the Lionhearted made. So these are two important points, that when a mistake is committed by Muslims, because Muslims are not infallible, it is not because of their Islam, and when a mistake is committed by some Muslims, it is usually not representative of the common public opinion.
Okay, so we're talking about leadership making sometimes intolerant decisions. What is the place of forgiveness in tolerance? How do Muslims, how do we forgive the intolerant? And is that a form of tolerance? I can pose this question to...
Yeah.
No, we have 3 degrees of, or 3 responses to injustice. The first one is to, in fact, we have 4, but 3 were mentioned in one ayah. وَإِنْ عَاقَبْتُمْ فَعَاقِبُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبْتُمْ بِهِ. This is the first degree. And if you punish, then punish in a way that is comparable to the way you were punished, or in a way that's equal to the way you were punished. Or if you strike back in a way that is equal to the way you were beaten in the first time. So that's the first one, which is, establishment of justice, not an iota more than what's justice.
So you can't, when you have experienced something that wasn't tolerant, like you were wronged, to when you can
seek retribution, you can seek retaliation, but you could not seek more than what has been inflicted on you. Like even in qisas, which is the laws of retribution, if there is a wound that was inflicted on you, but it cannot be inflicted on the perpetrator without the possibility of excessiveness, then that
that is a form of tolerance.
That will be dropped
in Islam.
No wound will be inflicted on the perpetrator because of the possibility of excessiveness. So that's the first degree.
Okay, I think we have to discuss the second degree after the break.
Sure.
We're going to go to a break right now. Please don't go away. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. Before the break, Dr. Hatim was explaining to us about forgiveness and how it's an act of tolerance, and how you don't take more than what the crime was. Can you pick up on the second point?
As I said, that there were 4 degrees. The first one is equal retribution. The second one would be to suppress your anger. The third one is to clear your heart from any hard feelings. The third one is to do acts of kindness towards those who
have wronged you,
oppressed you.
Yes.
I have to say, though, that although this applies amongst individuals, it may not necessarily apply in the same manner with regard to communal.
So like in a societal way, or governmental.
Yeah. Well, so if like a country attacked a Muslim country, I don't think that this would necessarily.
Like we're going to just forgive you for invading us.
It doesn't work this way between countries, but this works between individuals. And it would work between individuals if there is no fear that evil will dominate by
tolerating
good
that.
doers tolerating excessiveness or injustice all the time. It is an individual exercise so that you train yourself to be forgiving and to not seek 100% of your rights or complete retribution and to pardon others and so on. so that God may pardon you and forgive you. Allah Azza wa Jal. وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا وَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. And let them pardon and forgive. Don't you want Allah to forgive you?
So we want to stress that while you should tolerate some acts of aggression towards you as an individual, perhaps some of your rights were taken, you should not react in such an aggressive manner that you're taking others' rights and being intolerant. So is there extremes to, I think it's turning the other cheek or something, is there an extreme to being over-tolerant? And what can that lead to?
Well, turning the other cheek, I told you the 4 degrees. If someone oppressed you, you may even give them a gift or like a basket of fruits in exchange, and that would actually change the enemy into a dear friend, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. But this applies to individuals, and the qualifier here is that this practice will not lead to domination of evil
Okay.
or injustice.
Okay. I'm going to turn this new question to Dr. Haytham. We're talking about how some people perceive Muslims as intolerant, and they bring up that sometimes they restrict places of worship of other religions, perhaps churches or synagogues, being built in Islamic nations. Is that something, what do you think about that?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a very interesting point, and normally when we receive this question, we start to maybe be apologetic in terms of the answer. But let us turn the question around. And we say that, okay, maybe we don't tolerate these things, but the non-Muslims, do they tolerate everything from our side?
Yes.
So, as I said in the beginning, that's why I laid down 4 important points, areas of discussion. It is true that we don't tolerate certain practices. Every single human being does not tolerate certain practices. Every single nation does not tolerate certain practices. Why don't they allow us to implement Sharia in the West? Do they allow us to do this?
I think on a...
They don't.
They don't in an official capacity,
Yeah.
but maybe in a personal way.
Yeah, a personal way to a certain limit.
Degree, yes.
For example, multiple marriage, which they call as polygamy. I don't know whether polygamy is the right translation or not. But they accept the person to be married and have a number of mistresses, but they don't accept Muslims to have 2 or 3 wives. They don't tolerate this, and they keep criticizing Muslims because of this. So they don't tolerate that, and we don't tolerate certain other aspects. As simple as this. This is the first point that we need to put in mind. In fact, once you see certain things that they don't tolerate, we find that what we tolerate from others, provided that it does not bring harm to the society, is more or far bigger than what others tolerate from Muslims. And the true color has been manifested in some non-Muslim countries. Switzerland, they stopped what? They banned
minarets.
Yes. What can you tell me? Can someone explain to me what does minaret?
Well, it symbolizes...
Exactly.
It symbolizes
exactly.
something,
So it symbolizes the presence of Islam. You can see now the level of intolerance once they feel that their core values being, as they said, attacked. So then the true color appears. So there is no discussion to say, well, we don't tolerate certain practices and they tolerate it. No, maybe they tolerate it because of a political stance on a short period of time, but the true color appears. In France, they don't tolerate a small piece of clothes covering the head. Covering the head, which is the hijab in certain places, and niqab. Tell me, what has niqab to do with the local security or with the values of the country or with harming any member of the society? It does not.
Well, they believe it's suppressing women's,
Okay, so those
like their
women-
husbands are forcing them to do
Okay,
it.
they could have done one thing. They could have asked women who are wearing it.
Exactly.
Okay, but they just banned it.
Yes.
So that is just an excuse.
It's a huge act of intolerance.
Exactly.
In reality.
So what I meant to say that if Muslims, and this is I'm especially addressing the Muslims, okay, and in particular the youth, because sometimes they say, oh, they accuse us of being intolerant, etc. If they accuse us of being intolerant, you have to turn, okay, the table, as they say, and you can show some other practices that they don't tolerate.
But
as
isn't
simple
it,
as this.
according to Islam, we have to be tolerant, especially in the Islamic nations. For example, you cannot ban other places of worship for other religions. Isn't that Islamic Sharia rule, is it not?
No, see, if we want to look at it from, again, an academic perspective, there are certain practices that Islam tolerate. And there are certain practices that Islam does not tolerate. With non-Muslims and even with Muslims. With non-Muslims, certain practices cannot be tolerated. And certain practices by non-Muslims can be tolerated or must be tolerated within the Islamic system. For example, if Christians want to practice their own ibadah in private, not in public, we should allow them to do this, because this is a private matter that belongs to them. Even churches that have been built before Islam comes to this country, they should be allowed, and we are not allowed to destroy them. But yes, building new churches after the domination of Islam in that country, that is not allowed. So you cannot just take a blank check by saying that Islam does not allow the building or the establishment of other faiths, places of worship. If the place of worship is already there, we leave it. So this is in terms of places of worship. In terms of practices, certain practices, these scholars were discussing whether we allow the non-Muslims to drink alcohol if they drink it by themselves as a private matter, not in public. Because Islam was concerned or is concerned about the public safety. And if any practice may jeopardize the public safety, then Islam stops that, whether it is from Muslims or from non-Muslims. It is true that Islam does not allow the public manifestation of shirk and kufr. For example, Islam does not allow people to build crosses in public places because, let us remember this, Islam is not only concerned about the rights of people. As I said, Islam is, this life is a test.
Yes.
So Islam is concerned about the right of the creator of the people, the right of Allah. And unfortunately, the contemporary discourse, even exercised by Muslims now, they neglect the rights of people, the rights of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And they only focus on right of people, while in reality the rights of the creator are more important than the rights of people. So if Allah, the creator of mankind, does not allow, he doesn't like to see shirk, someone to be worshipped beside him, he doesn't like at all where Muslims are practicing their religion and they are the dominant society in a specific place, to allow what he hates and what annoys him. That dimension is totally absent in the current discourse. That's why this topic is misunderstood.
So we're allowed to restrict things such as shirk, selling of alcohol and perhaps pork, but we're not allowed to tell the individual that they cannot do this stuff in private.
So in brief, we don't tolerate two things. Practices that annoy Allah Jalla wa Ala, okay, and things that cause public safety or put public safety on stake.
Okay.
Other than those things, we are not much concerned about them.
Okay, we're going to go to the audience to see if they have any questions about this very interesting topic. Any questions?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Which
What
sheikh are you directing your question to?
Dr. Hatim.
Okay.
What is your advice to Muslims living in areas where they're clearly not accepted and the non-believers go to the point of trying to stop them from worshipping? If they leave, is it considered not spreading Islam, or if they stay, is it considered making your future generation non-Muslims?
Well, Muslims are allowed to live as minorities in non-Muslim countries given that they're capable of manifesting their religion. And if you want to add another qualifier, it would be ensuring that their progeny will do the same. If you're comfortable that you're capable of living by your values and you're comfortable that your progeny will have a chance to do the same, then you're allowed to stay in such place. If you're not, then you want to emigrate, because emigration has a great reward, and emigration from a place where you can worship Allah, or you have limitations on your worship, to a place where you have less limitations or no limitations, is prescribed until the Day of Judgment. So that's, briefly it.
Do we have any more questions? Yes, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah. Well, my question is actually more so on a smaller or individual scale. With regards to like our daily lives and like our family and our environment, with dealing with each other, as Muslims. Basically, like I would like to know, is there like some kind of like guideline or some kind of code or level of when we can like know, or how we can know what sort of things to tolerate from each other and what not to, or when do we let it pass, and like when do we speak out? When do we speak out? We're, as Muslims, we're ordered to speak against things that are not good. Amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, right? Which is speaking against things that are wrong and forbidding. So is there like some kind of code or some kind of guideline?
So guidelines for tolerance. I think we were talking a little bit about that in the first part of the show.
Yeah, on like a more individual level,
on
like
individual
daily
level.
lives,
Yeah. Yes, this is a very good question. Jazakallah khair. See, we need to divide our practices as Muslims. I'm not talking about Muslims and non-Muslims, about Muslims, the practices of Muslims, into two types. Major differences between Muslims and minor differences between Muslims. This is generally speaking. Minor differences between Muslims, like the way sometimes we pray, different school of thoughts. Some, people put their hands here. Some people raise their hands. Okay, some other people, they don't raise their hands. Some people say Ameen loudly. Some people don't say that loudly. Certain elements of zakah. Okay, some people find it is compulsory to give zakah on jewelries, golden jewelries, and some other people don't believe in this, and such these practices. So wherever scholars genuinely differ on a matter, that matter is considered to be a matter of minor differences between Muslims. So if it is a minor difference between Muslims, then that should be tolerated, generally speaking. So I can pray, or I must pray, behind a person who doesn't say Ameen loudly. Or if I don't believe to say Ameen loudly, I should pray behind the person who believes otherwise, and so on. There is nothing to stop me in befriending a person who believes that he needs to follow Shafi'i school of thought or Hanafi school of thought, and I am Hanbali, for example, or I am Maliki. these differences are minor differences, they must be tolerated. And as Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, if every two Muslims differ, then they boycott each other, then there will be no rahmah between them, and there will be no unity among Muslims. One of the friends of Imam al-Shafi'i, Yunus ibn Abdul A'la, he said, I haven't seen a person who is wiser than al-Shafi'i. One time he grabbed my hand and he said, my brother, we can be brothers although we disagree. Okay? So this is just an example.
And it is the right to disagree also.
Yes. Okay? Even if we disagree on most of these fiqhi matters. So these are minor differences. They must be tolerated. Now there are major differences.
Can we discuss those major differences after the break? Because we ran out of time. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Dr. Haytham was just talking about the minor differences between Muslims that can be tolerated. And now you're going to speak to us about the major differences that we should not tolerate.
Yeah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Major differences between those who attribute themselves to Islam, such as the finality of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, prophethood. Some people who still attribute themselves to Islam believe that there is a prophethood after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, I'm the seal of all prophets. This cannot be tolerated. As a concept, maybe the people, we deal with them differently. And I wanted to mention a very important concept here. There is the action and there are the people who are acting on the action. Sometimes, and this is very strange for the Western philosophy, to differentiate between the action and the person who is doing the action. We don't tolerate certain actions, but we might live and tolerate the person who act on these actions.
Okay.
So, because this is an example. So that belief, we don't tolerate it at all, because it negates what all ummah agreed upon. It negates one of the core principles of Islam, the finality of the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is an example. Or another example of those who insult the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That belief, we don't tolerate it whatsoever. Now the people who do this, it depends on the context and the situation. So these are major differences, examples of major differences that generally speaking we don't tolerate the action, and we might not tolerate the people who are acting upon those actions, although we might tolerate because of a certain context the people who believe in these beliefs. And if you may allow me, there is a very interesting story that happened with Al-Ma'mun. Al-Ma'mun is one of the Abbasi caliphs, khulafa. He was a scholar, Al-Ma'mun, although he held certain opinion regarding the creation of the Quran. Anyway, Al-Ma'mun, he used to gather with people. So in the gathering, one time he saw a person who converted to Christianity. So he told him, you used to be Muslim, isn't it? He said, yes. Then he said, why did you become Christian? You need to clarify this for us. If you have a doubt, we will clarify the doubt for you and remove the doubt. If you have no doubt and converted to Christianity, then we will apply the capital punishment. So the person said, I was so amazed and shocked because of the differences in Islam. Then Al-Ma'mun started to address this issue. A very profound statement of Al-Ma'mun. I cannot translate it as profound as he said that. But he said in the beginning, he said, as of our differences, we Muslims, We have what we called as minor differences, like how many takbir we do, how do we do the tashahhud, how do we do these practices of acts of worship. So he said these are minor differences, and in fact many of them are complementary differences. And then he said, yes, we have some major differences, like al-ikhtilafu fi ta'wili kalamillah, like our differences regarding the interpretation of certain ayat, verses of the Quran. He said, we have these differences. Then Al-Ma'mun said, please listen to this. It's a very profound story. He said, you need to tell me, don't you have any differences in Christianity? Are you telling me that there are no major differences between Jews or Christians? And by the way, I remember, what's his name, brother from South Africa who studied, who was a priest. He said, do you believe... No, another brother from the same school of thought. Oh. He said, do you believe that there is, or there are over 1,000 Bibles?
Different editions with
different editions, and some of them have major differences. We have one Quran. Okay? And even those who claim that there is another version of the Quran, they just hide it because they feel that they are odd in this. And there are, so Al-Ma'mun told him, are you telling me that there are no major differences in Christianity or Judaism? Then Al-Ma'mun added one important principle. He said, if there are no differences within Islam, then how Allah Jalla wa Ala is going to test people? There will be no meaning for a test. There should be something that people to be tested with. And these differences is to test people who are going to strive for haqq or not. That's why in the last ayah of Surah Hud, or the last passage of Surah Hud, when Allah Jalla wa Ala said, وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ, they do not cease but to differ. And because of this, He created them. One interpretation of this is, Allah created them to differ, so they strive to hold the haqq, or to seek the truth. So these who find the truth and hold firmly on the truth, they will go to Jannah. They will be successful in this test. So Al-Ma'mun told him, if there are no differences within Islam, there will be no meaning for testing people, as Allah Jalla wa Ala created us for this. That person, after listening to this discourse, he said, Wallahi, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah Jalla wa Ala. I bear witness that Muhammad is the final messenger. Atubu ila Allah, I repent to Allah from what I have done.
And so he wasn't punished. He was, because he was explained the right way.
Exactly.
So he was not
this
punished.
is another dimension. In fact, I was not looking at this dimension. That Al-Ma'mun, although this person committed apostasy, but because the matter was clarified to him, and he accepted that, which means that he is a sincere person, he is not a cause of harm, then his action, although it was a crime at a certain point, but it was tolerated after he repented from it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience?
I have one question. Assalamu alaikum. My question goes to tolerance. As you was talking about the West, they're kind of becoming more intolerant. Like in Switzerland, they're banning minarets, and then in France, they're banning the hijab. And now there's this party in Geert Wilders, they want to ban the Quran. So how can we as Muslims, especially the ones in Holland, tolerate this if it was to happen?
There are people who want to ban the Quran?
There's this party, Geert Wilders, he wants
to... or burn.
He wants to ban it.
Ban.
Yeah, because they try to burn the Quran.
That's in America,
certain churches. In certain European countries as well. And
so how do they deal in this Muslim community with...
I guess the question was directed to Dr. Haytham.
Okay. Yes, I've been visiting Holland, and we heard about this party. See, this party is just, in a nutshell, just seeking attention. they don't have anything to offer, even for the Dutch community. Their memorandum is based mainly on Muslims. We need to get rid of Muslims. We need to get rid of those immigrants, etc. And it is a test from Allah Jalla wa Ala at the end of the day. We have to be confident, first of all, of our religion, of what we believe in. And we need to be intellectual enough to call them for open debates and discussions. This is one thing. The other thing we need, I remember the brothers in CARE, they launched a campaign. Don't burn it, read it. But don't burn it,
read it.
Read it.
That's a very interesting point.
So, instead of banning them, those people sometimes I sympathize for their ignorance and for their maybe simplicity. Islam is an indestructible religion or way of life. So do they think that they will ban Quran? But just a matter of either seeking attention or so whatever their agenda is. So we need to use this to make publicity for Quran. And in fact, they are doing it for us freely. So let us use this opportunity to spread Quran among people, among Dutch people. And believe me, there is no powerful da'wah other than spreading Quran. Just the word of Allah Jalla wa Ala, even without many comments. Some people say we have to explain the principle of right hand possess, and we have to say that, well, this has to be understood in a certain context, etc., etc. That might be true, but Allah knows that when He revealed this book as a guidance, إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ. Indeed, this Quran guides to that what is better. And Allah Jalla wa Ala says in the Quran, وَجَاهِدْهُمْ بِهِ. Use this Quran to make jihad against disbelievers by just Quran. So spread the Quran among people. I am very confident that once people read Quran, Allah Jalla wa Ala will force them to open their hearts for Quran. And by the way, as we are living in the West, some Westerners, they know the power of Quran. And they don't want even to touch Quran, because they know that if had they read the Quran, they will have no choice but to submit to it. So that's why they are avoiding even reading it. So let us take this and turn it to be a positive thing rather than a negative thing. And of course we need to teach our young people, the Muslims, that they have to be more attached to the Quran so they can spread it among others.
And perhaps we can use our confidence in the Quran and the Sunnah to tolerate ignorance, because we have confidence in the message, so we can tolerate the ignorant people. Is that point correct?
Tolerate and clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. My question about Islamic tolerance is basically when the topic comes up in the West, there's people who compare basically Sharia to democracy, and the fact that they like to bring up basically democracy, basically they say it's equal towards all the citizens, but like Sharia has a basis that's not man-made basically, and they say the fact that, for example, in Saudi Arabia, maybe that all non-Muslims are also under the Sharia, and in the West, basically, democracy doesn't have a religious basis, so they basically try to say Islam is not tolerant, and I was just wondering what would be a good response to a claim like that.
Yeah.
Perhaps it can be a short reply because we're running out of time.
Each community decides on the core values of this community, and democracy should allow the majority of Muslims to decide on their core values, because the majority in democracy is given that right. So in the Muslim countries, the divine law is given precedence over other laws. The divine law of Islam had given freedoms and autonomy to the non-Muslims that is unprecedented. Even nowadays in the 21st century, when countries that are considered to be more towards the liberal side, such as Canada, think of the arbitration system. Their model of the arbitration system is nowhere close to the model of Islam. In Islam, they have been given autonomy. They have been given the right to have their own courts, to have their own judiciary system, and to seek judgment according to their laws in matters that pertain to their religion. In Muslim countries throughout the Middle East, you will find this practice quite prevalent. So they have been given more than any other, more than most of the liberal societies give to non-Muslims. In fact, in Bada'a al-Sana'a, which is a Hanafi book, one of the mainstay Hanafi books, it says that if you kill a pig that is owned by a non-Muslim, compensation will be due. Although if you kill a pig that is owned by a Muslim, there is no compensation because this money, this property is not really respected property. But if it belongs to a non-Muslim, then you owe him compensation. That is because we have our contract with them, our covenant with them, is to leave them with what they worship. So the Sharia itself gives them that room, and more than a secular regime, it allows them to seek judgment in their religious matters via their own courts and according to their own religions. So I think it is unprecedented, and it has not been matched yet.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Hatem. That's all the time we have. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I'd like to thank Dr. Hatem. Thank you very much for coming. And Dr. Hatem, thank you very much. And our in-studio audience, thank you guys as always. That's all the time we have. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'd like to remind you guys of our email address, talk@huda.tv. Thank you very much, and we'd like to see you guys on another episode.
When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt.